Good evening and welcome to the December 2nd, 2020 Wilmington School Committee meeting. Mrs. Dixie, we are missing Jesse Fennelly and Jay Samaha will be here late. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Our first item of business, oh, you weren't very late. Welcome. Our first item of business is public comment. We have one in-person public comment this evening. Do you want me, Mrs. Newhouse, do you see if he's there? Thank you. Oh. And committee, we have 3 written comments that you have in your packet. Good evening.
Good evening, welcome.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I know, now you're about to. You can just give us your name and address, and then you can share your comment.
Absolutely. My name is Matthew Savage. I live at 55 Garden Ave. Thank you, school committee and Dr. Brand, for allowing me to speak tonight. I come to you as a parent of a senior in high school. I was made aware on Monday that there was a good chance that the Middlesex League would not allow spectators to be part of the winter sports for hockey and basketball. So I went ahead and I did some research, and I can tell you that I've spoken over the last 2 days with a number of parents, both within the Wilmington community as well as the Middlesex League community as well. I've taken down some notes here that I wanted to talk to you about it. So I'm very saddened to hear that the Middlesex League has banned spectators from winter sports. I'm upset that this was done unilaterally without any public forum or opportunity for parents to talk about this. The Middlesex League is comprised of 12 teams, as you all know. Of those 12 teams, there's only one rink, the Hayden in Lexington, that does not allow spectators into youth hockey games, with Belmont having limited capacity. 5 rinks allow 1 spectator, and the remaining 5 allow at least 2 spectators. As rosters are limited to only 20 players, at the most there'll be a total of 80 spectators at each game for the rinks. And 40 spectators at rinks that obviously allow 1. Based on the available information, most rinks in the Middlesex League, including Arlington, Melrose, Stoneham, Watertown, Winchester, and Woburn, have seating capacity of at least 1,000 spectators. Therefore, capacity would only be between 4% and 8% of capacity. Because attendance is limited only to parents of players, any exposure would already occur in the home, with strict protocols, including spectator spacing, contact tracing, temperature checks, mask wearing, etc. There is a very limited risk of exposure. Most, if not all, of the high school players are already playing in fall leagues to prepare for the season. They are playing at these and other rinks throughout the region that allow spectators. In most cases, they are traveling farther at more rinks than they will during the hockey season. In fact, for the 12 teams in the Middlesex League, there are only 10 rinks that they play in. I've spoken to basketball parents as well, and the same information holds true as well. A number of the gyms and arenas where the basketball teams play hold at least 1,000 spectators for capacity. The rosters for the teams are generally smaller than the hockey rosters. So again, you're looking at below 10% of capacity for these parents. This rule does not follow any scientific or statistical guidance given by the state nor the MIAA. In fact, MIAA rules and regulation guidelines for ice hockey, and basketball indicate that spectators are allowed, allowing that they must practice social distancing between different household units and accepted personal responsibility for public health guidelines. In addition, the EEA, the Massachusetts Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, workplace safety and reopening standards for businesses, and other entities providing youth and adult amateur sports, Phase 3, Step 2, allows for spectators to join games. Regarding indoor competition, the facility cannot exceed more than 50% of the maximum capacity. As I've already pointed out, that is generally 500 people. We're only talking about, at most, 80 people. It also goes on to say that indoor facilities must limit capacity, again, to no more than 50% permitted occupancy and ensure adequate social distance of at least 6 feet for all visitors and staff. Therefore, the decision made by members of the Middlesex League doesn't really make much sense at all. I've spoken to a number of parents, and we are willing to do whatever it takes, including buying our own thermal thermometers to take temperatures, ensure that people sign in, properly input their information for contact tracing, and whatever it is to allow us to be there. From practical, statistical, and a scientific standpoint, there is no reason to exclude the parents from attending games for the rinks and the arenas that allow it. Now, these kids have missed out on a lot. They certainly probably would tell you, if you twisted their arm, that they probably want their friends attending the game more than their mother and their fathers, but I think they actually want us there too. So I'm here also to appeal to you as a parent of a senior. I, along with other parents, have been deeply devoted to our child's hockey development. From learn to skate, to learn to play, to youth, and now high school hockey, we have been there. We've been there for 6 a.m. practices, 9 p.m. games. We've been there at Restucia, right up the street. We've been there in Connecticut, New York, Maine, New Hampshire, and a number of other locations. We volunteer as coaches, as board members, as boosters, and fundraisers. We've hosted dinners for the team, another time-honored Wilmington tradition that is yet another victim of COVID. We have been there for the first goals, their big wins, and their heartbreaking losses. We've gone to tying their skates and driving them all around to watch them become the young adults and accomplish things at the high school level that we never would have imagined. Most of these young men and women will never play again a competitive level sport. My son has 10 games left in his hockey career. So much has been taken away from these seniors. They had no junior prom. They might not have a senior prom. They had no homecoming. They can't walk into school like the big people on campus. My son is a member of the National Honor Society. Will he have a graduation where he'll be able to wear that special tassel? I don't know. It has been really hard on these kids. And to take away the opportunity for them to share in their last chance in athletics with their parents is absolutely unconscionable. I'll be sending my son off to college next year, and things will obviously be different. I'm appealing to you as a son and a father to allow their parents to be part of the high school season. Again, in talking to other parents from different leagues, different towns, and different sports, we will do whatever it is to make this a possibility. I appeal to you, Dr. Brand, as part of the board of the Middlesex League, to please reconsider this decision. I tell you that we will continue to pursue this. We will be putting together a petition, and between the basketball and hockey parents, you're talking well over 1,000 parents. We won't let this rest. I completely understand how hard it is and how hard it's been on you, Dr. Brand, to be new to this and have to deal with all these things that we couldn't have imagined 18 months ago. But there is absolutely no reason why parents cannot see their children play high school sports. I thank you guys for your time. I appreciate everything you do. But again, please, please reconsider this. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Savage.
Thanks for your comment.
Thank you.
There are 3 other written comments, Donna Connolly, Jean Lewis, and Christine Lemieux in your packets. Moving on to item 4, we have approval of minutes, November 18th, 2020. Is there a motion? Thank you, Mrs. Burns, seconded by Mr. Ragsdale. All in favor? That's unanimous. We have warrants L37. Is there a motion? Thank you, Mr. Smaha, seconded by Mr. Bjork. All in favor? That is unanimous. And payroll ending 11/11/2020 and 11/25/2020. Mrs. Newhouse, thank you. Mr. Smaha, all in favor? That is unanimous. Item 5, superintendent's report. Dr. Brand.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. 4 items specifically into the superintendent's report, although I'm going to pass over 5A grant updates to be returned to at a future meeting. So moving on to item 5B. And actually, just to bring to your attention and members of the community, there are items that are included in the packet for items 5B, C, and D. So if I may, I'll go in that order. First off, the virtual caregivers series information. I'm so pleased on behalf of Ms. Murray to be able to share with you some upcoming opportunities for our parents and guardians and caregivers in the community for virtual events, and really aimed at trying to provide support for our parents, guardians, and caregivers in the first part of the new year. The information that's included in there outlines the dates and times of the various opportunities that are going to be forthcoming as part of this virtual series. There are a number of nights beginning on January the 7th, supporting kids in using effective coping strategies when faced with tough challenges. On January the 12th, the Caregiver's Guide to Remote Learning. January 21st, behavior planning at home, and positive behavioral interventions and supports in the home, January 26th, along with some others as well listed. We'll make sure that we make this widely available to members of our community. Again, I want to thank Ms. Murray for her work in helping pull this together and coordinate it, and in an effort to try and adapt and respond to obviously the challenges of bringing people together, but certainly pursuing virtually the opportunities to provide for members of our community. Item 5C, Center for Disease Control update on school operations. In your packet, you will find a memo that I put together, an effort to just provide some context. I'm sure that many members of our committee and community have perhaps seen this in the news recently. Dr. Robert Redfield, Director of CDC, or Centers for Disease Control Prevention, was in the media fairly recently, with specific focus on and commentary on operations of K-12 schools and the ongoing health crisis and the pandemic. And I just thought it important to highlight a few of the elements of his comments recently around the ability for K-12 schools to operate safely with in-person learning, albeit with obviously certain things in place and guidelines that have been established. I think one of the salient points for me from these recent comments is underscored by our continual situation here in Wilmington, and that is that the data that has been collected throughout the country and perhaps beyond, but certainly throughout the country, does show that the largest threat at this point in time around transmission is not within schools. And we continue to, here, at least in Wilmington, be in that place where we have not seen school spread, although the cases are slowly starting to rise within Wilmington and many of the surrounding communities. School spread, that is to say, the disease spreading from one individual to another in the schoolhouse, is not something that we've seen. And this was certainly echoed most certainly in Dr. Redfield's comments. On that memo, you'll see a link if you're interested, or members of the community that are interested, to dig a little bit deeper in terms of those recent comments. Item 5D, quarantine requirements, is also included in there, and thank you to Ms. Crow for, Doreen Crow, for providing a little bit of an update. This comes directly from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the DPH. And I won't go into it in great detail, but more specifics there. I know that this can and is starting to get a little bit confusing around how long to quarantine, if you've had close contact or not, what you need to do if you are in quarantine, and so on. So it's certainly a reference source to draw your attention to, and we'll have this posted, of course, as part of the packet. On the note of quarantining, and I'll expand upon this a little bit more as well within the staffing section, the personnel report. But one of the growing areas of focus for us is, quite frankly, not so much the positive cases, but it is the ramifications of quarantining for our staff. This has been something that has been probably in the last 2 weeks of growing concern. And just to give you some context, these are very round numbers, but right now, going into tomorrow, we are looking at approximately 30 staff who are in place of quarantining because of close contact. So despite the fact that our numbers in district for actual positive cases are in my opinion, very low, what we are seeing, and I'm sure this is not at all unique for other districts, I can't imagine that it is the growing reality of the uptick in cases in the community and the ramifications or implications, the connections with staff, and putting staff, of course, in a place of needing to quarantine as a positive contact. So this is a growing concern from just our ability to obviously staff and keep staff in place. And as you know, and I know I've talked about it many of times, this is obviously one of the central worries and concerns. It's not lost upon me, it's not lost upon our administrators that there is a growing degree of frustration in terms of being able to actually staff all classrooms on a regular basis. You need to keep in mind that number of approximately 30 does not include any staff who are scheduled for a day out for personal reasons or those that are simply calling in not feeling well. And so this is a growing concern. And as the positive cases, should they continue to grow and there's interconnections with staff, this is something that I can certainly tell you I'm very concerned about in terms of the ability to maintain this. We are not able to fill 100%. I use the term fill rate, number of staff out with substitute coverage. We are approximately 50%. That is no shortage of efforts to hire substitutes. Ms. Stern Armstrong is doing so, quite frankly, almost daily. We are capitalizing, for example, right now on college students who have returned. She just shared with me earlier today, it's promising of getting about a half a dozen of those in. And since the start of school, I don't even know the exact number, but it's in the double digits of substitutes. So that's the good news. The problem is it's a supply and demand. I don't mean to be over dramatic here, but it is a growing concern, and as it relates to quarantining and the situation within the community, it's something that is becoming very difficult to contend with, and understanding that some number of our community are getting a little bit upset with the reality of what's happening for the coverage on a day-to-day basis. I just thought it was an appropriate time to share the reality that we're working within. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions if members have.
Mrs. Burns.
So right now, the district is at 50% staffing?
No.
I'm sorry.
No, 50% on average is about what our fill rate is for substitute coverage. So as an example, roughly speaking, now I'm using very general numbers, so please do keep that in mind.
Yep.
But if there are 100 staff that are out on a given day, we're running about 50% coverage. Now, it's true to say that not every single staff member always requires a substitute. For example, a guidance counselor, he or she doesn't require a substitute. But what we know to be is, even if it's not 50%, it's not 90% of the ability for the district to secure a substitute for every person who needs a substitute coverage. If that makes sense.
So, yeah, so I've got two questions. At what capacity are we with staffing in general, including substitutes? How many, and if you know, and I'm not looking for exact numbers, but if you can give me like a ballpark, range? I want to know what the percentage of staff who may be out on leave of absences or FMLA or quarantine. I want to know only because my other question to you is at what point with staffing would you, and I'm not going to hold you to it, consider maybe having to go fully remote based on lack of staffing? And I'm speaking generally, I'm not looking for, black and white particulars, but I would like, knowing that where we are currently in the surge, and after celebrating a holiday recently, which will, and we've got Christmas coming up, and we're still seeing increased numbers within the medical community coming in, cases, and it's all over the news, hospitalizations, deaths, they're still climbing. I was just, and again, I'm not going to hold you to anything, but I would like kind of like a general thought of, at what point would you have to consider, would we have to consider going fully remote based on the current status of the, health?
Yeah, I certainly, it's a great question, it's an important one, and I'm not sure that I have a straightforward answer.
No.
I will say a couple of things, though. Certainly, the easy response to that would be if we simply do not have enough bodies to supervise students in person. Mm-hmm. That obviously would be a safety issue. Mm-hmm. What the reality is behind the scenes, though, is the impact on our staff who are in person, mm-hmm. Who are necessarily needing to step up and provide coverage. Now, this is not a terribly unusual thing, in particular at the secondary level. That is to say that it's common in a given year where we are short substitute coverage, and we do need to rely upon the assistance coverage of other staff who have planning time, in which we need to tap them, or other teachers, or educational assistants. There's a myriad of staff that we in normal times would look to help out if we were short of substitutes. In these particular times, as these numbers grow, that is, I know, in the conversation with principals, becoming an immense challenge mm-hmm. on staff, because it's not just a here or there circumstance in which we need to reach out, it's with great regularity. So that's taking its toll. But this is the question. There's no escaping it. It's the question of how long can we hang on. And this is not a precursor to suddenly turn around and say we can't do it tomorrow morning. Mm-hmm. But I'm watching these fill rates carefully, watching these numbers of quarantine carefully. I don't know where the two collide, but it's something that I and my team will have to sort out the next short period of time.
And I know, you and your team have it in the forefront, delivering the best education we can with the limitations that we have and the modalities. I think, I guess, keeping that in mind is what's the best method, taking the current situation as it evolves, to ensure that our students are getting, the most instruction time and the best education we can provide in the current circumstances. And
right.
That's my kind of biggest concern. It's not going to be a happy thing, because I hate to take kids out of their learning environment, because I think we all know that they do better, especially when they have their peers around them and their mentors in front of them. So that's a huge, it's not an easy decision to make if we have to make it at some point.
No, and thank you for acknowledging that. And this remains part of the commitment to try our best to keep to do what we think is best and what I think is best, and that is keep students in person for those that have opted to do so as much as possible. A few weeks back when we had, but I'll just expand upon this, a couple of staff quarantining. In those circumstances, we did have them teach remotely from home to students who were in person in school. And that worked. But it also requires a body, a person, an adult, to be present to supervise students. You had I'm just making this up, I wasn't saying, a fourth grade teacher who found he or she in a circumstance of quarantining, they were at home. Instead of not continuing their work. They were on board and they taught their kids remotely. But the students who were in cohort A or cohort B were in school, we needed an adult present to supervise. So it's just as much as a substitute. So there's also a capacity issue there that we're also grappling with in some of these circumstances.
Thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Samaha?
Yeah, just a kind of a follow-up to that. If we're thinking about staffing issues, would this would be like a building-to-building call if the staffing numbers went really low versus a district-wide call, or how would that work? Does that make sense? The question. So if the staffing numbers were to go, talking about the fill rate, right? If you had a big problem with quarantining staff in, say Woburn Street, for example, that would be a Woburn Street call versus the whole
I think
district?
so, yes, I think so, and I think that's possible. I mean, I don't know if it will materialize that way. It might be just the law of averages, and how the numbers aggregate. But yes, I've thought about that, certainly,
Okay.
as opposed to, taking the action to close the entire district. But, and that's the difficulty, right? There's no sort of formulaic approach here to make the determination to say, all right, this is where we've reached this threshold and we just can't sustain this. But yes, a building by building basis. And look, in normal times that can happen here and there where you don't have all buildings in the same number of days instructionally. There's a power outage that might take a building offline for 4 days and they have to, so that's possible, and that's not an issue that I would be concerned with the Department of Ed. But that would be the first course of action. It could also, though, be a combined building depending on the cross. We have some shared staff between buildings, so there would have to be an analysis along those lines too that might bring together more than one building, perhaps.
Mr. Ragsdale?
So how granular might we be able to get in one of those situations? We've already done a building. I mean, the high school went remote for 2 weeks while the rest of the district was doing hybrid. Could this be at a grade level? I mean, is it possible that grade 5 at the north is remote, but the rest of the north is coming to school? Is this one house? Is this Explorer is remote at the middle school, but the other houses are still coming?
It's a great question, and I definitely think that as well could be a possibility. Again, if we just happen to have a larger number of grade 4 teachers at a building who needed to find, were in a place of quarantine, that might be the approach or programs. And I've talked with principals about that too, that could also be a first approach. I think that, everything is sort of wide open here for the ability for us to make decisions to respond. And I think, I'm thinking about it in that way, through that lens as well too. The difficulty will be, though, not just making those decisions, but for how long, right? And so if it's on the basis of quarantining, we sort of have, by and large, these 2-week intervals right now currently. And I know the quarantine time period is being adjusted, but I think that would be in my mind, a reasonable starting point if we got to that place to say, all right, we've got a critical mass of teachers in building X who find themselves in a place of necessarily quarantining. It just seems that it's too difficult and challenging. We're stretched too thin to be able to offer in-person instruction and close that building for 2 weeks. I mean, that's where my mind is right now going in terms of the possibilities. But if we can do it on a grade level or a team basis, then certainly I would be open to that as well.
And I think what I really appreciated is every time it's a very specific, like you're really reacting to something very specific. So there's a group, so there has been an issue of just one house or just one this. So it's like, I think that it's not, oh, okay, we'll just close everything. It really seems like you and the team are looking at each situation in isolation almost and saying, okay, who does this affect and how do we deal with that? And then things can continue on as whatever normal is, but as normal. And so I think it makes, as a parent, it makes me feel like everything is being looked at really carefully and the contact tracing is being done in such a way that we're able to say, okay, here's where it needs to close, but we can continue to maintain that. So I appreciate that.
Thank you for the feedback.
Other questions, Mr. Ragsdale?
So you mentioned that we have about 30 teachers quarantining right now. are these all quarantining because of in-school close contacts? Or are
So-
some of them quarantining for reasons outside of
So just to
school?
clarify, and thank you, that's a great question. So it's staff combined, so it's not just teachers, I should be clear about that. Staff, so that could be any of one in our employee. And no, these, I don't have specific numbers for you, but based upon the COVID cases that we have that are, again, quite low, we know for a fact that these are, I can't say all of these, but certainly I would say the majority of these would be through outside contacts, outside of school. Some would certainly be from in school, but a very small portion. It's a mirror image of what is happening, of course, out there right now in communities where there's the spread within small family groups or what have you. That's
Okay,
definitely
so
the case.
if I heard that right, the majority, without pinning a number on it, but like the majority of the staff that are out right now are quarantining because of contacts not connected with the positive cases that we've had.
That would be accurate to say.
in our schools.
That would be accurate to say, yes.
Okay, because I was trying to think a little bit about, because we have, I think, 7 current cases, according to the dashboard.
I think that's
And,
right, but yes.
And so kind of just thinking about how when we get one case, then how does that spread? How many people are affected by that? And of course, in some of the cases, we're lucky and there are no close contacts, and so
Correct.
no one has to
Right.
quarantine.
Right.
Is there a distribution across the district, or is this something that concentrates at more of like the elementary or the secondary level? Or the high
I think
school?
I asked that question actually today for the total that we have, and there's no sort of, my understanding is there's no critical mass, if you will, of either the students. We also have quite a few students who are in quarantine too, for the exact same reasons, but I'm not talking about those, I'm talking specifically staff. There's no critical mass, it does not sound like. That is to say, there's no larger number at building or buildings. They're spread out. So in the aggregate, right, it's a lot, but over 8 buildings sprinkled throughout, it's a couple year total there.
Okay. I was going to say, I'm going to move us on to new business, but Mr. Smaha, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to go back, to the CDC memo in here. And just to sort of clarify, the way I read it is this is sort of a confirmation that what we're doing and the protocols and the procedures that we have in place are working and schools are safe. It's not a suggestion that we move closer to full in-person. That's how I'm reading it. I just wanted to make sure that that's a correct reading on it, because I think that people could read this and maybe think, well, okay, let's just go back to full person. And it makes me think about some of the discussions we had this past summer about, what lunch would look like at the Shawshene School, where it would be like 10 lunches starting at like 8 a.m., or something, something crazy like that, in order to keep all of these things in line. So I just wanted to sort of just clarify that, and that's how you're reading it, or everybody's reading it as well, as it's not a signal that says, let's push forward to full in-person. We're doing a good thing here. It's working, it's safe, and it's just sort of a confirmation of that. Is that correct?
It's exactly correct. And just as, although not highlighted in Dr. Redfield's comments, but as a point of reminder for members of the community, because I fully appreciate that this is where some might be quick to go, and it is that, okay, if schools are safe to return, let's get everybody back. We are still working within the guidelines of the 3 to 6 foot distance. And as I'm sure many will remember, as part of the largest part of the planning that put us and the vast majority of districts in the place where they are with the hybrid model, centered around that 3 to 6 foot distance. And just as a reminder, although we in Wilmington, like many others, have embraced and committed to the closer to 6 foot distance, even at 3 feet, if you might remember, and I know it seems like such a long time ago, the analysis that we did from cafeterias and lunchrooms and classrooms, we're at 3 feet distance. We cannot bring everybody back in person. So schools are safe, but under the current, I would argue, and I think that's what Dr. Redfield, that's my interpretation as well, under the current conditions and protocols, if you will, that we're following, that's what's allowing it to maintain this place right now. Thank you.
Mr. Ragsdale?
I also wanted to jump back to something previous in the superintendent's report, which is just quickly to comment on the virtual caregiver series, which I think is terrific that we're putting this forward. We're asking so much of our parents this year. And one of the things that's come up several times in our meetings is what resources are we providing for parents? Like how are we trying to help them embrace this new role and handle the challenges that they have? And I think that just from looking through the different series, the different sessions that are being offered, some of them from within district, from with our own district staff and some from others.
Yes.
I think really looks like a great opportunity to try and relieve or some of the burden, give the parents some of the tools that they need to cope with the situation. And I hope that we publicize it widely so that people are aware that these are out there.
Yes.
I agree with Mr. Ragsdale. I would also, I'd love to see some academic support sessions as well. I think parents are being asked to do a lot in terms of supporting the asynchronous work, and I think, and while this is of primary importance, I think that sometimes the PBIS is so important because there's such a struggle with getting the work done. So there's sort of this blending of the social emotional piece and the academic support, and so I'm hoping that maybe we can see some of that as well, because I do think parents are having a little bit of a difficult time sort of, am I doing the right thing? Is this correct? Is this not correct? How do I make sure? It's tricky.
Right, sure.
So, but I agree. I think let's publicize it widely and get these dates out there and share away on social media, because I think this is such a great resource for families.
Thank you for the feedback.
Okay, anybody else? All right. There is no old business, so we'll move right into new business. And item A is Wilmington High School 2020-2021 schedule review.
Sure, and hopefully Ms. Peters is lurking around.
Oh,
I
is she
think
waiting
she's
out
going
here for
to
us?
pop around the corner any minute. She
Yeah.
is here. See, I told you. Look at, here
Hi,
she is.
Ms. Peters.
As she's making her way up, Ms. Peters is here tonight, as you can see, and the first item of business, schedule review. So just to provide context, and then I'll turn it over to Ms. Peters. As you know, so many of the schedules associated with hybrid and the situation that we're in are unique and challenging, and that holds true K to 12, pre-K to 12. But there is a uniqueness in particular for the high school because of the nature of the programs, courses, and the schedule, and just not to get too complicated into the weeds, but just how the high school program works and has to work. At the elementary level, things worked out such that those students who were going fully remote, we were able to identify, corral together, if you will, and then assign one individual fifth grade teacher, third grade teacher. Far more cut and dried, neat and clean. It's not that way at the high school. And without a master template or master plan of how best to make this work, as you know, everyone had to all districts had to sort of figure out an approach. And we did that here. And as you know, here at the high school in Wilmington, we had a very small, in my opinion, and I think statistically from what we were able to find out from some informal outreach to other districts, we had a very small number of students at the beginning of the year who opted for fully remote. I think I said before, at least maybe not to the committee, but certainly amongst the team, I do believe if we had a larger number of students, like we're led to understand from other districts, it may have been easier to, for example, take a math teacher out of the department and dedicate he or she fully remote to support the students. But we had a very small number, and in fact, I would argue that created another layer of complication in terms of how to think about it. In Wilmington, not necessarily the same as all districts, I also want to be mindful of the fact that we really did understand that the desire here in Wilmington was for parent guardians to have their child receive education from Wilmington teachers. And so at the beginning of the year, we opted not to outsource, if you will, our students to third-party providers. There are districts indeed that are doing that. Virtual high school options, but we did not want to do that. The staff here did not want that. Ms. Peters did not want that. Our community did not want that. And so it was with that commitment that Ms. Peterson and her team came to the table with an offering of a schedule and how to embrace what we call the Cohort C, Cohort C students. And she's here tonight to give you a bit of an update on further consideration of the schedule, grappling with what it is, and some possible changes in the future of how to be responsive to some of the concerns that have surfaced. So with that, Ms. Peters.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Our schedule that we did choose for hybrid is very much like a lot of district schedules. But we have found, based on the experiences that we've had, and we haven't had a lot of hybrid days. Out of the 49 days of school, we've only had 16 hybrid days. But the schedule does present some problems, and there are some concerns that have come my way. In particular, the limited time that is dedicated in the schedule to our Cohort C students, and also the long periods of time of asynchronous work for all of the cohorts. So we are looking at revising our hybrid schedule in order to increase synchronous time for all cohorts, not just Cohort C, but also for Cohorts A and B. So we have looked at many schedules. We created probably about 15. We brought it down to 11. And we really have come to look at a couple of them that we feel will help the situation, so that we are reducing the asynchronous time for all cohorts. We are increasing synchronous time for Cohort C, and we're providing some consistency in the curriculum and in the content for all cohorts. So I have a building committee, about 16 teachers work with me on this. We've met 4 times. Yesterday was our 4th time, and I think we've come to look at 2 of them that we are very hopeful that we can put forward to the staff and then also to the community to get their input, so that we can increase our time with students, as we're looking for more contact time with students for all cohorts, not just for Cohort C, but for all cohorts. So that's where we are right now.
Mrs. Burns, thank you.
Do you have a timeline, Mrs. Peters, as to when we may see, once it goes out for feedback and such, when we may see implementation of the final product? Do you have any idea what you're hoping to kind of execute this?
Well, we're going to work with small groups of teachers on our CIT day next Wednesday.
Okay.
Our departments are meeting for an hour during that time. So we are going to have small groups work on looking at the schedule and having our committee actually go out to those small groups and explain the schedule. Sometimes on paper, it's not clear.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what they're planning to do. We have a faculty meeting on December 16th, so I hope at that point we can make some decisions to move forward. And then I hope to get the school community involved, parents and students.
Because that'll be right around the holidays, so.
I'm hoping that we can come back in January with the new schedule.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Mr. Ragsdale?
Can you describe what types of changes will enable you to offer more synchronous time for hybrid and Cohort C students?
The time for synchronous has to take away time from someplace. So it may be necessary, we're looking at taking some time away from in-person to make some of our day synchronous for cohorts that aren't in school on the in-person days.
So when certain students are in school, they will not necessarily have synchronous teaching time, but they might have an asynchronous in-school assignment. so that the teacher is freed up on those. Because of course, the problem is right now that on all of the, every day except Wednesday, the in-person teachers are teaching in person to class and not available for synchronous instruction for remote students. And so is the idea to free them up on some of those other days, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and have other types of work for the in-person students to work on while they're in school?
Without really giving away the schedule that we're looking at, the in-person time would be reduced, so that the time that it's reduced by would be synchronous time for cohorts that are not in person.
So I think, so we don't have the schedules in front, and I think that's intentional because
Yes.
you're very,
Well, I haven't shown
you
the
want to talk
staff.
to your staff about it first. So I think the reason we're not seeing it, they're not seeing that yet is because we want to make sure we share that with the staff. And if we give something away in here, then the staff would be finding out about it through this, which isn't appropriate. So I think that we're trying to sort of get us prepared to see something, get the community prepared for, sounds like a slight, small change, but it still needs to go to the staff, and they have to sort of see it and feel it and see if it works out for them. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, and I was not looking for details because
It is hard to explain. So,
I was looking more of what we might call a theory of action than the details.
Mr. Samaha?
I just want to thank you for taking the time to do this and to really think about it. I think it's really, responsive of you to hear the feedback from both your teachers and your students and families and everybody, and to really think this through. So I'm very happy that you've taken the time to do this. So thank you.
well, we're happy to do this, really, for the students. It is in their best interests, I believe.
And it's been, and I'll extend that thanks because it's on top of, everything else that's just difficult enough to maintain for Ms. Peters and her team, circling back to this, recognizing that there's possible areas for tweaking or improvement, with a vision that maybe wasn't even possible back in the summer. But also keeping in mind, and I know Linda does, but and I know you do too, that there's no perfect answer here, a perfect model or schedule. That these are the constraints within which we are trying to work, and back to what I said at the beginning, commitment to keep our students here in district with our teachers, and with relatively smaller numbers creates, not exactly a perfect storm, but for lack of a better word, in terms of coming up with or cultivating a schedule that's going to meet everyone's needs. But, the commitment that they've had, the commitment that the teachers, I know Linda's continuously underscored for me, is that they recognize that there can be some tweaks and adjustments that they think will be better for all in the end. And so that's the goal that I know they're pursuing here. Thank you.
Thank you, and I do
Thank you.
appreciate it and the update. And I'll just echo what Mr. Samaha and Dr. Brandt said. My one question is, do we anticipate a revision to, or a renegotiation? Is this going to be something that has to go back, it will go back to?
Well, within,
Sorry.
no, it's okay.
I don't know if I want to say the words MOA, but is this?
Within the language of the MOA, it does leave to the building level and the building principal the ability to adjust or refine schedules, and so that's the view that we're looking at this right now. And the engagement of members of the building-based team have been a part of this, so certainly, these changes or adjustments would still be within the parameters of the existing contract as it relates to total number of sections being taught and so on.
Okay.
So there's not viewed to be any need to return to reopen the MOA, for example.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Any other questions? Words of gratitude? Thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Linda.
Nice to see you all.
Thank you.
Likewise.
7B, personnel report?
Personnel report, I
that
will
you?
take that, yes. I'm sorry for that. Mr. Armstrong is not here tonight, but in your packet is just a one-page overview with lots of names and titles and positions, but in a way that's been more consistent than a typical year when we would try and give you periodic updates of personnel. We're trying to do that a little bit more with some regularity here. knowing that there's lots of interest in terms of where things are at. We, although not reflected on this, but approximate numbers, we have somewhere between mid-30s to 40 staff who are on leave and have been since the beginning of the year. That's for a whole host of reasons, but all within the with a variety of abilities for staff to take leave. So it's a large number that we've been contending with, in addition to now the quarantine piece that we were talking about earlier. Sometimes I think miraculously that we've been able to continue to fill positions, and I really mean that, knowing that every district is out there in a similar place. I'm quite frankly astonished that we still, when we have a posting, have people who are applying. That's amazing to me. At some point, I don't know how that continues, but it's continuing right now. Some positions, a little bit more so for others. You can see the open positions on the far right column of replacements. There are a few open positions, that's indeed true, but tremendous progress, and thank you to Ms. Stern Armstrong and the respective administrators who are involved in this work. We are feverishly, I see the paperwork, it comes through Mr. Ruggiero and then to me. As soon as there's an opening, it is acted upon, it's posted, we get all over it as quickly as we can and try and move through the process. And if there's an open position that has been around for some time, it means that we just haven't been able to fill it. It's not a question of it sitting on someone's desk. What's happening in some circumstances is also, though, that we are competing with other districts, and I know for a fact that we've lost candidates. So there may have been one or two candidates who applied for a position, who interviews were completed for, a job offer was extended, and we were not able to secure the person because they took a job in another district. And right now, if you're an educator, you have choice, whether that be closer to home or a district that had a longer term position than one we were offering or what have you. So there's lots of factors here that are at play. But I wanted to give you a brief update, even as complicated as it might look here in terms of where things are at. So with that, happy to take any questions if you have any.
All right, that brings us to 7C, Interscholastic Athletics Update. Is that Mia?
Yes, with Magic, she's going to be around the corner too, and here she comes. Ms. Muzio is here tonight, our athletic director. Come on in, Mia, at that hot seat right there at the front. It's been unfortunate, given the circumstance of not being able to bring greater spotlight and opportunity for Mia, new to the district, as you know, this year. And in her short period of time, I have to tell you the great ideas and the thinking that she's done around how to expand information for our coaches, information for our students, and everything in between is really, it's there, it's sitting there, but of course it's under the radar with all of the other things going on. But she's been a very active part of the planning with her colleagues. As part of the Middlesex League for what comes next, I can tell you, I'll speak on behalf of her, but also myself, that the Middlesex League, of which obviously, as you know, we are a part of, at least that which I have, only the previous 2 years to have seen, is really come together. And that's not to suggest it was apart before, but is really acting as and trying to do so in a unified way. Understanding that stakes are high, concern is high around how do we move forward with athletics in this time period. The athletic directors meet regularly. Superintendents have been meeting with more regularity as well, too, as we try and grapple with this. So she's here tonight to provide you with an update on a number of aspects related to athletics. Yeah.
Thank you. It's nice to see everyone in person. Sorry that I haven't been able to meet everyone, but hopefully soon. Just to give you guys a brief update, as you all are aware, in August, the DESE and the MIA came together to come up with a 4-season athletic calendar for the school year. And more recently, on November 20th, the MIA Board of Directors approved and it's in the document that is in there. They approved the calendar, the first calendar that you all have, which is a winter season from mid-December to the end of February, a floating fall season from the end of February to the end of April, and a spring season from the end of April to early July. For the winter approved sports as well, the MIA has also voted on, the Board of Directors also voted on and approved sport-specific modifications, and there are links for those within that document as well. Highlights from the MIAA Board of Director votes include the winter season will have a new start date of 12/14, Monday, 12/14. Modifications for the sports of wrestling, indoor track, winter cheerleading, and dance were not created because those are going to be moved to a different season. Those would typically be in this winter season. And also for those that are moved, indoor track was moved to the fall 2 season, that floating season. Wrestling, winter cheer, and dance were moved to the spring season. The first calendar that you all have encompasses almost every sport that the MIAA offers. The more specific Wilmington calendar is down towards the bottom. I'll get to that in a minute. The colors on the calendar indicate the risk level from the EEA. So specifically in regards to Wilmington, just to give you all an update with the sports that we have and which ones of those were approved, we will, with the MIAA approved sports, the ones that we would be participating in include basketball, ice hockey, and swim and dive. And just to clarify, swim and dive is a co-op with North Reading High School. Following sports were moved: indoor track to fall 2, wrestling to spring, and winter cheer to the spring. The Middlesex League intends to follow the same type of guidelines that we did in the fall, which include some practice limitations, game limitations, and we did change some dates. So we followed the same guidelines as the MIAA, and we're going to start with 12/14, and our first contest date will be 1/2/2021, after the winter break. Roster limitations: typically teams have a few players who swing from one level to the other, maybe JV kids that move up to varsity. We've decided as a league that we should just stick with the roster that we have. So if you are on the varsity roster, that will be the roster that you play for, and there won't be any changing between teams. All coaches will take the NFHS online COVID-19 for coaches and administrators, and there will be no spectators at the Middlesex League events during the 2020-2021 winter season. The decision was made after discussion and full agreement between the superintendents, principals, and athletic directors. After all of that information, which is all in that document, Wilmington High School and the WHS Athletic Department are seeking approval from school committee for the participation in boys and girls hockey, swim and dive, which is a co-op with North Reading, and boys and girls basketball during the winter season, under the guidelines and modifications outlined by the MIAA, the EEA, Department of Education, and the additional direction added by the Middlesex League. And below that on the document that you all have are just some items for consideration, which include the benefits of participation in athletics, as well as some information about health and safety protocols, what we can do for those athletes who are missing out on their season, and just a few items. I can go through them if you want, or I can wait.
Would you like her to go through them, or do you feel comfortable?
I'm comfortable, but I do have a question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
So can I just get additional clarification of the rationale with regards to, and this was something that I've been monitoring on the social media accounts about spectators not being able to come in. I mean, I understand the protocols in place, but some of these facilities are large enough to accommodate other aspects. I'm just like trying to expand my understanding of that decision and what the rationale behind it was.
So, I mean, I think there was a lot of conversation with the superintendents about this topic, as well as the principals. And as athletic directors, we had the conversation as well about, you know, the importance, the main priority is allowing the student athletes to play, and the plan to live stream as many games as possible, and looking at that as good compromise between the two with dealing with the indoor facilities and the limitations on that. So I think, we took the lead from, and we came together as a group with all three levels, and the consensus seemed to be that we thought main priority-wise would be getting kids out there to play, and the spectator piece comes second. So.
Right, so I'm just looking for the information as to what was that's without question.
Yeah.
But I'm looking for a little more clarification, taken into consideration the regulations from the state and such. What was it specific with regards to spectators?
There are the 40% inside the building,
Yeah.
and I think that was part of the conversation with the
So it's 40%
superintendents.
of the total inside a building?
Yes,
Okay.
inside the area in which you are planning on having your event, whether that's in a hockey
Rink.
or a gym. So I think with those limitations, trying to err on the side of caution was what everyone came to the conclusion on, that if we can live stream the games and we can have that opportunity for parents and student athletes, that I think erring on the side of caution with regards to, because I think very often everyone says that they will be 6 feet apart and they will have their mask on, and I think that on very, very often occasions, everyone kind of pools together in one area. So I think that was part of the consideration.
Okay.
It's a lot to monitor as well. And we will have people working in the rinks and working at basketball games, but I do think that it was very much to err on the side of caution when it comes to, especially right now during the holidays, when we are in this surge. We also made the decision to move the date back to almost 1/2, which is after Christmas break, to try to, give ourselves as much time as possible to make sure that the kids can get out there and they can play.
I think if I could just add, part of just to expand upon what Mia said, part of, the first part, and it took some time for the conversations to get to the point of committing to even, move forward with, continuing to move forward in sports, knowing the surge is anticipated to come. It's arguably here, moving indoors, a whole different element from the first set of sports that obviously is causing greater concern. And I can say that too, not just for my colleagues or counterparts, but I could hear from some of them around their Board of Health directors. So there's different perspectives across the board, as I think we can all appreciate. When we initiated these discussions, I can think back to some of those early ones, there wasn't necessarily across the board no pun intended, a slam dunk to say, let's move forward with these sports, let's move on with it. It took some discussion and some consideration, and there were some who said, I'm not even sure if we can commit to X sport. I want to have more of an expanded conversation with my Board of Health director. Once we got to that point in time, it then became, as Mia said, all right, there's going to be enough to contend with and be concerned about, just as it relates to the athletes and working with this environment. Unfortunately, the spectator piece, in terms of everything else, was not considered to be a priority under the circumstances. I don't know where that lies in terms of going forward. That is to say, if there'll be a revisiting of that, I'm not sure. I can't speak certainly on behalf of the group.
Sure.
But that's, at least at this juncture, where we
the
came
metrics
to.
are different for each of the community
Yeah.
within the league, and I do appreciate that everyone is standing together consistently in uniform to say, and I think that's something too, not often considered, depending upon where the games are played, that the, metrics for Wilmington might not be the same metrics for another member of a league, which could increase a higher risk of close contact. So thank you for that clarification, though. That is helpful.
Thank you.
Mr. Ragsdale?
I certainly agree that the kids getting to play is, that is the reason that we have sports, not for the kids to play, not for the spectators to watch. But even if that's the priority, that doesn't mean that there can't be both. And I think when I look at some of these sports, which even the winter sports that we have, except for swim and dive, are coded red as the high risk. And if we're having, contact, high-contact sports like basketball and hockey in the first place, it seems a little odd to me that having a relatively small number of spectators, even if it's limited to 1 or 2, or even just 1, which has been done in some sports, in some of these, large gyms or arenas, doesn't seem unreasonable. And I think that there's, certainly it is an extra thing to hold on to, and, and I don't want to get into, I don't want to be second guessing, and of course this was not our decision alone. But I think that there are some reasonable questions about why the sports are deemed safe enough to play in the first place, and yet adding even 1 spectator for the athletes to watch is considered unreasonable.
I mean, I think that also speaks, well, part of the decision I do think was the consistency purposes across the league. We've done that from the very beginning in the fall, and I think the same way we do things within our league decisions, it was something that the superintendents, principals, and athletic directors, everyone came together, and it was something that we wanted to be consistent with across the board.
Certainly, and I mean, you can't really, for an endeavor like this, you can't have different rules in different places where you're going.
And I think that was originally considered, that each district would make their own decision. Way back when this all started, when we started with sports in August, and we all spoke, and our superintendent spoke, and it was very important that we were all consistent as a league.
Mrs. Newhouse?
I certainly appreciate all the hard work and thought, and I do agree that the number 1 priority is to let our athletes be able to play. But as others have said, especially with some of these bigger arenas, I don't see why, not just open it to any spectator, but why can't we open it to 1 or 2 parents? Some of these kids, it'll be the last time they get on a basketball court, it'll be the last time they get on a hockey rink. And live streaming just is not the same. I have a child who plays hockey, and watching it on TV when you're home, half the time you can't even tell if it's your child out playing or not. So I know it's a lot of work, and you guys are doing your best, and the number 1 priority is certainly getting our kids to be able to play. But I would definitely like to maybe see if the Middlesex League would reconsider that, give parents 1 badge, 2 badges per parent, because some of these places hold thousands of people. We're going to be well underneath that 40% capacity. And it would be nice to at least get the parents in to be able to watch, and, keep the rest of the spectators out, to me would be okay. But thank you.
So I'd just like to say, and I think I'm pretty much echoing the comments of my fellow committee members, but I would say that, you mentioned a couple of times, the priority was getting the schedule set and the sports allocated. And when that was done, when a consensus was finally reached, there must have been a huge sigh of relief. So I can understand where perhaps spectators, the idea of spectators wasn't necessarily considered as fully as it might have been. And that's not a disparagement in any way, shape, or form. But I hope that maybe, given this input and the input that you've heard around the community, that perhaps there will be perhaps some more discussions.
Yeah, and I can't recall when the next meeting is scheduled for, but I know we are scheduled to meet, and so it certainly would not be surprising that there's similar feedback in other districts, and so we'll keep you updated.
Well, I think as we heard in the public comment this evening, which I think is we're all still thinking through that, is this idea of senior parents. So if there were a way, and I'm not sure if that's an issue but
right.
If one senior could get 1 badge, so then you're really reducing it. I mean, I understand, so for fall, there was 1 badge per student athlete, but it was outside.
Yes.
So it's a whole different, right? I mean, it's completely different when you're dealing with the outdoors. So I understand the worries, but I wonder if we could maybe prioritize those. I think one of the comments the community member made this evening was this is the last time his child will play like, in this way competitively. I was going to say professionally. We are professional here in Wilmington, competitively. And so this idea of maybe prioritizing maybe seniors, upperclassmen, I don't know. I mean, just something I think to say, I don't think, it sounds like there's going to be quite a bit of pushback. I'm sure that, and this just came out, I think I just got this yesterday, right?
Yes.
So this just came out yesterday, and I've already heard a little bit about it. We had a public comment this evening. So I imagine there's going to be quite a push. And so I guess if we could go back and sort of maybe come to some sort of a.
Yeah, and I can absolutely hear the feedback from other athletic directors. I'm sure they will tell me about it in our next meeting. And then there's also, I'm sure the superintendents will meet again at some point. But we tend to meet on a weekly basis, so I'm sure I will hear from them.
But safety is our first priority, I mean, for sure. So if someone said, there's no way to monitor them, there's absolutely no way we'd be able to do tracing, well then, of course, I mean, I think that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, if you don't have to go to a mall right now, you don't go to a mall. So we don't want to sort of put this out there as being, but I just think we want to sort of listen to the families also and hear what they're saying, if it's a possibility. But if there's real reasons why, like absolutely not, it's way too unsafe, well then, I think everyone would understand that. All right, any other questions, comments? All right. Thank you so much. It's nice to see you.
I hope to see you all
in 3D.
again soon. I have a fall review at some point for all of you.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, just to clarify, we are looking for action, right, for you?
I don't see it, well, it's not in my,
yes.
it's not in anywhere. I don't see a,
Yeah, I saw
A
some
motion.
approval for a certain,
I mean, we can certainly, I
the
don't.
following sports were approved, oh, I'm sorry.
Well, there's in bolded that are seeking approval
Yes.
to approve the
Sorry, it was
participation
buried,
in
right.
in these sports.
Yes.
There's not a motion, but
So is there a motion to approve?
I'll offer.
Mr. Bjork, is there a second? Mr. Smaha, all in favor? That is unanimous.
Thank you. Apologies about that.
Thank you very
Thank you, Mia.
much.
Thank you.
Next, we have 2019-2022 WPS Strategic Plan Revisited.
Yes, thank you. So in your packet, in addition to the memo, is a document that you have seen previously. And I thought it timely, even if admittedly a bit of a stretch to think about, but timely to bring it back to you. And what I mean by that is, as you know, and as the community is aware, an awful lot of, I think, great work by many went into the development of the 3-year strategic plan for the Wilmington Public Schools. You approved that plan and the related action steps over a year ago here. And a lot of activity kicked off and got underway in alignment with and in support of the various initiatives and action steps with that plan. As you can appreciate, that really all came to a crashing halt back in middle of March when we went into this place that we're still working to try and recover from. But that being said, I think is important as your superintendent to be trying to think ahead, think to the time period in which we have to return to greater degree of normalcy. And alongside that, thinking about how to still support the movement forward of the district. So the purpose of it here for you this evening is just to rekindle, if you will, the conversation, to bring focus back to the many very important and I think very good things that were established and identified as and felt to be important as priorities for the district. What I've done with the support of the central office leadership team is taken a serious and hopefully realistic view of the timelines that we had for the various action steps. And given where we're at, and given that we're now hovering closer to the midway point of the year, what's possible, what we think is possible, if we can continue in some degree of normal operation. So it's not lost upon me that this is a bit of a wing and a prayer in terms of the ability for us to, with each passing week, get a little bit more solid, of a solid footing. But I wanted to bring this back to you just to share with you some of the preliminary thinking, where we see this going. to be quite honest at the outset, this was a 3-year plan. I think, as I hope you can appreciate it, it almost becomes effectively a 4-year plan in some regards. Not to wipe away completely the work that was started last year, but we've had obviously some significant interruptions. And so what you can see on this document, again, this is something that was part of the package, if you will, that was brought forward last year. Now, what's been updated is the due dates, and just to sort of quickly draw your attention to that. And it was, right, trying to take consideration of what we felt our capacity to be, what we felt would be reasonable to rekindle related work, and what we think is doable. Now, I say that in that way, not because we, or members of the leadership team, are trying to sidestep this work, because a lot of the folks are leading that. But it's not alone that they're leading that, of course, and it's leading that with other staff or community members. And like we're all feeling, and I'm sensitive to, of trying to form a committee or a team is not so easy right now, just from a capacity standpoint. So we've tried to give ourselves a little bit of time here, really thinking ahead to the spring and the summer and into next year. And I just wanted to share this with you to bring, again, this back in focus, that it's not lost upon me that there's work that has to be done to support the forward momentum of the district. Of course, our first priority is maintaining our operations right now, but there's some things that we think that we can start upon the new year to start to rekindle. The Start Time Committee I've mentioned, that's one that sort of stands alone, because that's been put on the front burner, if you will, when we get back. I spoke about this at a previous meeting. When we get back in the new year, that's something that's very timely in connection to the possible outcomes of that. But outside of that, some of the many things here that we're prepared to either start or restart as we get a little bit more, time ahead of us here. So I wasn't looking for specifically any action or approval on your part, but ultimately this is a plan that you as the school committee you did approve, and so I thought it only appropriate to bring it back to at least start the conversation and gauge any feedback that you might have in terms of how we do move forward with this.
Thank you very much. This is helpful. Are there any particular questions about the due dates in particular? Mr. Ragsdale and then Mrs. Burns?
I was pleased kind of reviewing this to 1C that there are several things on it that we did manage to mark as completed, specifically things involving technology and the technology plan. And a fair number of them, I think more than I probably expected, that have been re-aimed for spring 21 that we still hope to be able to work on this year, maybe not again fully accomplished, but turn our attention to this spring and over the coming summer. I haven't looked closely at this for a while. It's been a while since I've looked this over. It's like, now I remember this all. It's all coming back to me.
Felt the same thing.
We had, it's like, wow, we had some ambitious plans. And I think that was part of also there's a little sense of loss that we really had some really strong initiatives planned out and, action steps planned and some momentum that has unfortunately, been ground to a halt by just our need to just have school run in the first place without being able to look at these initiatives. And I look forward to when we can really turn our attention to this. And I'm glad that we're doing this now, because at a certain point, even though we're, as has been said many times, kind of, building the plane while flying it, trying to run school during the pandemic, that, we still do have to be kind of looking ahead. And this, this plan that we approved, this is the roadmap for where we want our district to go. And, even though it can't go there on the original time frame, we need to be looking for the opportunities that we have to keep kind of inching forward until we can develop more momentum.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ragsdale. Mrs. Burns?
So I think I just need some clarification, and I hope it's not a silly question. In looking at it, and I'm specifically looking at the social emotional aspects, with the changes of dates. So it says to reissue survey, and the benchmark due dates have not changed in the majority of those areas that the due dates have. So to reissue survey, is there a timeline? I can understand the need to reissue the survey to update it per se, but I don't, it has the previous due date of the 2019-2020 school year.
Yes.
And I just didn't know what that, I understand the need that you're probably going to send out a new survey just to, I don't know, update it maybe? I just was just curious.
Yeah, no, if I may, thank you for pointing attention to that. I'm sorry it was not maybe clear. What we've talked about is that given the reality of which we, of course, all find ourselves in, Ms. Murray felt strongly, and others, that it would be important actually to check back in effectively through the mechanism of the survey, the tool of the survey, and find out where there may be other opportunities or priorities that emerge. So I didn't put a specific date there, but the survey was done. But the thought is it would be important and a lost opportunity if it wasn't done again.
Mm-hmm.
So we haven't picked a specific date yet, but the intention is to reissue it. So.
Would you think, and I don't know if you can answer this, that the upcoming series that will be taking place in January may be helpful for feedback with where parents are really struggling? Because I think this whole PBIS in a time where we're in remote and hybrid learning, I think is a unique perspective that we haven't yet, I never, I think, envisioned us having to consider previously. And looking at how we offer it to our students and parents in that capacity. So, I mean, I just think it's a great opportunity to really get that feedback where parents are struggling, and then where their children are struggling throughout this unique learning model.
Yeah, that's a very good thought.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Burns. Any other questions? No. I mean, I'll just say, so I feel as though we sort of did hit the pause button, but I think a lot of what we've been doing has really been in line with our strategic plan, right? So I don't think that we haven't been making progress. It's just progress that looks a little different than we expected. So I think the technology piece, clearly, I think we've come a long way. And so sort of baptism by fire. But if you look, I mean, at our social emotional piece, we're thinking about social emotional, we're thinking about it all the time, and sort of how our students and our staff are affected by this time. So I think that it's still kind of a guide star for us. And when I'm looking through things, I'm still kind of going back to these objectives and saying, wait, how does this fit in? So I agree, it's sort of, we would have liked to have made more progress, but I still think it's been leading us to do the work that we do, so. All right.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the CIT Day overview. Mrs. Elliott.
Sure. Perfect segue, actually, because I agree wholeheartedly that that I think at the forefront of everything we've been doing lately has been really connected to that strategic plan. And for myself, being new to the district this year, it's been so helpful to be able to look at that plan and know the work that went into it as the roadmap of where we want to go. And that actually was very, very helpful in thinking about the CIT days and planning for them. And like Mr. Ragsdale said, looking for any opportunity that we do have, knowing that capacity is somewhat limited this year, taking advantage of the opportunities we do have to address those things is really important. So that is actually what our CIT day will really focus on, a lot of what is in our plan. In a sense, as Dr. Brand said, it might be a little optimistic, but it feels really good to be planning, looking back at where things stopped last March and reassessing and digging back into some of that work. So that's what we'll begin next Wednesday. It will be the first of 4 scheduled CIT days for the school year. It will be an early release day for students who are in person and those who are remote. There will not be any asynchronous work provided for the afternoon. It will be a traditional early release day. And staff will be engaged in all types of different activities during that time, primarily related to, like, as I mentioned, sort of really reassessing where were we with curriculum mapping, continuation of science training, professional development training that we had a little bit of it last spring, but really needed more of it this year as we've been up and running with science curriculum. We'll be focusing on assessing curriculum mapping using the UVD model and developing plans for how we continue that work at grades 6 through 12. We will also be focusing on universal screening for mental health, social emotional learning, and having some training from EdTech Solutions on assistive technology. So those are the key highlights of what will be happening. Other departments, we're trying to certainly meet the needs of each individual department based on what they need at this point in time to use during this time. So we're excited to jump into this work next week and sort of see where we left off and continue that work. Feels normal.
That's excellent, thank you. Questions? Mr. Ragsdale?
When is the next CIT day after this? I don't remember now how we spaced them out.
January 27th, I believe, is the next one, and then there's March and May.
Thank you. And Mrs. Elliott, will we see sort of a breakdown of these sessions following the CIT day?
Sure, yeah,
Great.
we're just finalizing the details now. I'm happy to, as soon as I get all of the details, I'm happy to send it out to you as well.
Excellent, thank you so much. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. We next, last, I think, we're almost last.
Last, yes.
Superintendent goals, second reading, and here we are looking for an approval.
Yes, thank you. So essentially the same document in your packet for this item, superintendent goals. You recall that at the last meeting, I did come forward and provide you with what I was considering to be 3 district improvement goals, and by default, my goals arguably. The only thing that has been changed is the effort to try and draw a connection to the strategic plan. It doesn't align perfectly in all areas, but an effort to try and do so. The 3 goals, just really quickly in short, district improvement goal number 1, the Wilmington High School program and our vision of a graduate. And as outlined in the memo, effectively, this is really seeking to go deeper with consideration of what it is as the high school experience that seems to be most critical in terms of reconsidering, rethinking, or reshaping in support of the vision of the graduate that we, the staff and the leadership team here at the high school have developed. And so this is looking holistically at that experience because really when it comes down to supporting a vision of a school, the underlying programs and experiences and so on really should should have a strong through line. So that is goal number 1. Goal number 2, shifting to the middle school, somewhat similar, but really taking a holistic look at the middle school program offering, and in short, reconsidering and making sure that the program, the organization, the structure of the 6th through 8th middle school experience for students here in Wilmington reflects what it is that is what is ultimately best for the young adolescent. And so the goal here is to take a broader look at schedules, like I said, organizational structure, and overall experiences, 6th through 8th grade. And then goal number 3 specifically ties into the elementary level, and taking a closer look in connection with, this is aligned somewhat to the Mass School Building Authority applications, the capital plan that will be put out there in support of exploring alternative locations for the Wildwood School. This is taking a closer look at building idealistic building and grade level configurations in Wilmington, and what is it that as a community optimally that we would like moving forward. So really spanning, as it ended up, all three of our levels, elementary, middle, and high. And I'm happy to take any questions that you have. I appreciated your feedback the last time we met on these, and looking, as Ms. Bryson said, at ultimately your hopeful approval for these this evening.
Thank you, Thank you. MJ?
Dr. Braden, could you also speak to the recent correspondence you received from the MSBA?
Sure, certainly.
I think that's a really kind of important piece to this that I think is the public would be just as interested in as we were.
Right. So yes, and I can add one more piece as well to this. So the Mass School Building Authority, or MSBA, as we refer to it as, is the organization in which members of the community may recall we submitted 6 applications for our elementary schools to be considered as part of the core program, and they call it the core program, and that's more of a deeper dive at looking at possibly improving the conditions of an overall building. Those applications were submitted back in the spring, if I remember, of last year. Typically, the MSBA makes their final decisions in the early fall, if late August, September, but nothing is typical, obviously, in this time period right now. We talked about this previously at one of the earlier meetings. The MSBA actually just sent out correspondence today, and what they indicated is that they are going to effectively they're going to push off until it sounds like the spring, districts such as ours who applied for core programs, any decisions that they're going to make until the spring or even it could be the summer of next year. They also indicated that they're going to open up the application window again next spring, as they typically do for other districts. So we don't have any decision upon where we stand as a district or community, but no one else does either. So we're waiting in the wings.
Would we consider trying to reapply to get, just as a safety measure? I mean, I'm not sure what the rules are to the game.
So I don't know, and they were, the communication was certainly very short on any information in terms of if you did apply, I have to believe that something further is going to be forthcoming to districts to give us a sense of that, and also to give us a clear sense if we didn't, then are we going to just turn right around and reapply for communities that might want to. The other piece that I was going to mention, not directly related to the MSBA, but certainly this goal, is that capital item. You'll recall that as part of the capital plan item, we have, with the support of the town and Mr. Hull as town manager, a capital item. I forget the exact amount, but 80,000. Thank you. To engage with a third-party consultant to help the school district and the community explore possible alternatives for the Wildwood School. The shelf life, if you will, of that school is obviously limited, is of great concern in terms of the program, the ability to house the program and our students and staff there. And we know that regardless of what happens with the MSBA decision, any kind of possible building construction is many years down the road. And so it remains something that's important. Mr. Hall has indicated that understandably his office and such has been delayed with everything going on too, but I believe his intention is by the end of this month is to get that RFI. Thank you. All right, out for bid for prospective firms. So I'll keep you posted on any developments with that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Burns. Other questions?
Sorry.
What do I do? Mr.
The floor to Dave.
Is it related to MSBA?
It's related to, prior to making the motion on the approval of these goals, we had discussed doing it over a 2-year, review.
This is what I was going to ask about as well.
Oh, okay, sorry, I didn't understand.
No, I said-
I just didn't
so
know
what
if that should be a part of the motion made tonight, that the intent is to maybe have a midway point at the end of this year, and then to do the superintendent's, forgive me, I'm at a loss for the word.
Evaluation.
Thank you. Evaluation 2022. So I didn't know if the board would, or the chair would entertain including that in the motion made this evening.
I mean, we
If
could.
that's still the will of the superintendent.
I mean, I think we can approve the goals without deciding right now whether or not it's a 1 or 2 year period.
That's what I was going to ask if we could do tonight, because I think we can do that separately.
I think we
The
can, I
goals,
think.
And then the timeline for evaluation can be split apart.
I think that would be fine as we start to think about I mean, although it's so tightly connected to the evaluation, I feel like having a start on this first and then, because some of this, just to sort of do a check-in maybe in a few weeks or a month and say, okay, what are we thinking? Are we thinking it's going to take quite a bit of time? And so then we can start to rethink how we want to do our evaluation, which I think a check-in at the typical time would make good sense, to just make sure he feels that things are on track and we're collecting the data we need to do the full evaluation the following year.
It's, it's just, take into consideration the upcoming elections in April, which is the time that we kind of have that conversation, so you just want to.
So we can
Well,
put that, we can put that on the agenda for next time.
Yeah, I don't think we should put it off long, but it would,
Yeah, I agree.
it would also be good, I know that you were going to reach out to Dorothy Presser.
Yeah.
And it would be, just good to get some feedback from her and from MASC before we go forward with a timeline for the evaluation.
I agree. I just have one comment. So looking at, especially, well, all of them is not really, but goals 1 and 2, I'm actually seeing a lot of learning environment, which is Strategic Initiative 3.1, under that culture of inclusion. So I feel like to do all 3 of these, you're actually really looking at the learning environment as well, right? So I don't know if there's a way, not to even tweak it, I don't think it needs, but just so as you're starting to work on this, I don't
Yes,
think that
that's
you
very
can
true.
do
Yeah.
that without actually thinking through
No,
how we're
that's right.
fostering the
No,
environment.
yes, you definitely.
And also the building relationships piece, especially 3.2C, develop consistent protocol for school-level communication. So I think a big piece of this rethinking the building structure
Right.
in Goal
No,
3
that's a
has so
very
much
good
to
point.
do with that communication piece. So I guess I would just
You're right.
encourage you to really think through that objective
Mm-hmm.
3. I mean, I think with anything we're talking about with equity and inclusion, it's really not its own distinct thing, that it's truly integrated with everything we do. So I just want to point that out. Other than that, I think they look great. So if there are no more questions or comments, is there a motion?
I'll move to approve Superintendent Brand's goals for, I wasn't say 2021, but for to be determined, the goals that he has
It was
presented.
very eloquent, thank you. Is
All
there a
right.
second? Is there a second? Mrs. Burns, thank you. All in favor? That is unanimous.
Great, thank you very much.
Excellent, thank you so much. All right. Subcommittee reports. Mrs. Newhouse.
Just a quick reminder that next Thursday, December 10th at 6:30, we're having a second CPAC meeting. I'm currently working with Mrs. Brown-LeGrand and Mrs. Ebert to put together an agenda for that night, and we'll be sending that out shortly with the link to the Zoom meeting, because it will be via Zoom.
Excellent, and that will go out to everybody, or to the people who attended? How will people?
I believe that'll be going out to all, they'll be sending it out of their office to
Yeah.
all parents who are eligible to
Got it.
attend.
Perfect, thank you so much. Any other subcommittee reports? I'm just going to throw upcoming subcommittee dates. So, Mr. Smaha, we have an upcoming
Yes.
date, is next week?
Yes, the 9th, I believe.
Okay, and so we need to get that
Yeah,
agenda
Wednesday.
to Mrs. Dixie by Monday, is that correct? Okay,
Yep.
perfect. Any other correspondence, Mrs. Burns?
None this evening.
Okay. And then just some future school committee dates. We have our regular session December 16th, and January 13th, and January 20th is the recommended budget regular session. And then it's a very busy month to also hold January 25th, which is the town manager budget presentation at 7. It says location TBD. And I think that's it, unless there's any other questions or comments. Okay, final motion to adjourn? Mrs. Burns?
So moved.
Seconded by Mr. Smaha. All in favor? That That is unanimous. Thanks,
you
everyone.
very
Have a good
much.
night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.